So joining me now is Jackie Soles and Ken Copeland, and they are both highly esteemed retired Raleigh police detectives who worked on this case and many others that I covered over the years. Welcome to both of you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So, first of all, I'd love to just let our audience know a little bit about your background, how you got to where you are today, and basically, how you got into law enforcement. So, Jackie, you want to start?
Sure. I was born and raised in West Virginia, and I moved here with a college friend in 1986. I joined the police department in August of 1986, and I worked there for 28 years. I got 2 years off for good behavior. Um, and I worked my way up to detective and eventually retired as a detective sergeant with the police department. Now I'm retired and just take care of grandkids now.
Well, and Jackie, you were probably one of a few women when you started in the police department, and probably also one of a few women at that time that reached the detective, correct?
Yes, I was actually. When I first started, I was on a weekend platoon because back then we had weekday platoons and weekend platoons, and there was only one other female on the platoon with me at that time. And back then, in the old days, if we had any kind of like a rape investigation or anything that involved women, they would have a woman come and take care of the case, like mental commitments and things like that. She and I got run ragged just doing the female stuff that we had to do, female searches, female, mental commitments, rape investigations. And so it was very, very stressful to be a female back then. They've
Well,
changed all
thank
that
you.
now.
Thank you for being such a pioneer as a female
Thank
in
you.
law enforcement. I know that it had to be difficult, but you opened the door, I'm sure, for a lot of other women. Ken, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, of course. From Warrenton, North Carolina, small town. I left high school and went in the Marine Corps. I got out of the Marine Corps in 1992 and liked the rank structure and liked that type of service. So I immediately got interested in police work. And in 1994, I applied with the Raw Police Department. I was very blessed that out of 600 some applicants, I was one of the 30 some that was chosen. And I got hired in 1994. I spent 5 years on patrol. I made investigation the exact same time me and Jackie got promoted together in 2000. And we spent 10 years, or at least I spent 10 years in investigations. Jackie spent a little bit less. With a small stint, and we spent 2 years in commercial burglary. I went to a newly formed special victims unit, which we had a chief at the time from New York, so she made one like TV. And then in April of 2004, me and Jackie came back together in homicide, and we spent those years in homicide together as partners. I made sergeant in 2010. I went back to patrol for 2 years, and then I came back to investigations as a burglary sergeant, a robbery sergeant, and then back to homicide to supervise five great detectives who are all very good in that room. And then I made lieutenant in 2016, and I retired in 2017.
So, but when you guys started working on this case, how long had you already worked together?
We were in commercial burglary for 2 years together. Um, and then when they went specialized, well, she took away the specialization. When Chief Perloff took away specialization, I went to a district, and Ken went to special victims, which was one of the few specialized units. And I think that was probably 2 years maybe that we were apart. And then we both went to homicide in 2004 and stayed there until 2007. I got promoted. So what would you say, 6 years probably altogether we worked together?
Yeah, somewhere around in there. Yeah, sure
So you
was.
knew each other pretty well. Obviously, I can imagine police work when you spend a lot of time with somebody, you get to know each other pretty well. So when you guys first got put on this case, it was basically a cold case, if you will, that had not been solved. How many years out was the case by the time it landed on your desk?
I think it was 2.5 years, Ken, wasn't it?
Yeah, it happened in 2002, and we went to homicide in April of 2004. And I remember we had a meeting where all of the homicide detectives got a cold case divvied up. We sat at a conference table and everybody got assigned cold cases. And afterwards, everybody kind of picked at me because I only got one. They picked on me and said, "Hey, why does Ken only have one cold case?" And I remember Lieutenant Chris Morgan sitting at my desk in front of me, and he told everybody in the office, he said, "Well, Ken and Jackie's getting the Bennett case." And even though it's a cold case, it was a very active case. I mean, we spoke to the
Mhm.
parents or with, Carmen Bennett and the family. Chris Morgan was, constantly in touch with them. So even though the case was 2 years old, it was very active. And it wasn't what I expected. And I don't think Jackie expected to kind of get assigned kind of our first case in homicide. So April of 2004 is when we got it.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really high profile case that hadn't been solved. It was very unusual in Raleigh to have a stranger murder because that is not your typical case. Most women are murdered by somebody they know.
Yes.
And it was really Chris Morgan, who was kind of a legendary detective in Raleigh, very old school. He was getting ready to retire, and this was one of those cases that he really wanted solved. So now you guys inherit this case. How do you even start? I mean, I remember there were thousands of pages, right, of
Yes.
investigation documents to look through. How did you start?
I think we both just started reading the case.
Mhm.
We started at the beginning and read the case from the beginning, if I remember correctly. Isn't that correct, Ken?
That's right. I mean, when we first started, it was the volume of information. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was at least 9 or 10 three-ring binders, maybe more than that, that was on the shelf with the case. And me and Jackie had worked together before, and we had some kind of high-profile cases, if you will, in burglary. And we kind of knew how each other worked. So we both agreed that we would sit down, and it had to be kind of away from everybody. While you're in the office and people are working, they're constantly giving you opinions, their theories about what happened, they think happened. So there were a lot of times me and Jackie just stayed after everybody left and just sit there at the conference table with a cup of coffee and just read and read and read. And that's how we kind of was able to exclude a lot of this because we wanted to sit down and make our own opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, I hear this all the time from detectives who are currently working, who have retired, that the most dangerous thing you can do as an investigator is to go into a case with preconceived notions, right, Jackie? I mean,
Oh,
you
absolutely.
you want to have an open mind so that you're able to see the different possibilities. And there were a lot of red herrings, right, in this
Oh,
case.
absolutely. And I tell you, one of the biggest things we did is we actually did our own interviews. We went back and did re-interviewed a lot of the key people to get a better idea of exactly what they were saying. Because although all the detectives we worked with were really good and very good at documentation, you still don't get on paper what you get in person. And some of those interviews proved to be key. One thing I kind of always noticed about the case when they because I moved here from West Virginia with my college roommate. We had an apartment and everything. Like you always heard, oh, that was such a clean apartment. There was never anything out of place. I mean, no dirt, no anything. And I was like, how can girls that are living in an apartment be that clean? And when we went back and interviewed um, Stephanie's stepsister, she said, I don't know where they got that. She said, no, our apartment wasn't clean like that. And I think Stephanie's boyfriend even had a dog that had been in the apartment. And we were always led to believe, oh, there was no animals ever in the apartment. It was spotless. It was, everything was perfect. And obviously that wasn't the case. And going back and talking to her and other people really kind of changed our thinking on what we were reading and what might be the real
Right,
case.
and thinking maybe that there had been a cleanup, and that's not uncommon in a homicide case. Um, Ken, I know when you guys inherited the case, there had been all this talk about maybe it was a transient person, maybe it was a military person. Um, there were all these reasonings behind that, but at the end of the day, you guys kept going back to what makes sense, which is there had been a peeping Tom, and there's a good chance this person lives close because there were a lot of apartment complexes. So talk about visiting that apartment complex next door. How did you come to decide to do that? That was very close to Stephanie's apartment, right through the woods.
Well, when we first read the entire case, the one thing that stood out to me and Jackie is obviously there was 4 or 5 people that they considered a peeping Tom before Stephanie was killed. But after Stephanie was killed, there was only one other sighting of any peeping Tom out at the apartment complex. And they were doing covert surveillance, and they actually apprehended him, got his DNA, and excluded him. After then, there was no more sightings of any more peeping Toms. And me and Jackie both agree. She's got a lot of experience with sexual assault cases. I worked special victims for a year and a half. We both know that a lot of times peeping Tom, it's like true sexual predators. They start peeping and then they go up from there, whether it be
It
sexual
escalates,
assault.
right? They
And they
escalate into
escalate.
different crimes, right?
That's right. But we did not see that pattern reading all of these files. We didn't see any more peeping Toms. And we thought it was very unusual that there was a peeping Tom seen, but this peeping Tom did not go to another window, go to another victim, or be seen later on. So that's kind of what made us focus in on the peeping Tom, is because, a lot of times me and Jackie really just looked at the facts. You always have to be very careful on theories because everybody has a theory. And we always want to hear from previous investigators that had the case, previous lieutenant sergeants that had the case. But there's a reason it maybe it needs new eyes or a new perspective. And me and Jackie agreed that the first thing we needed to do is either include or exclude the peeping Tom. It was a very distinctive description for him. So that's when we made the decision to go back and revisit the witnesses that had seen the peeping Tom in the case. And that's kind of when we caught the first real break, quite frankly. It was one of the most important interviews we ever did in this case. And that was interviewing a person close to Stephanie, had seen the peeping Tom one night, and thought that he saw the very same man a few weeks later. And he was the first one that told us that he saw this man walking, and he walked from Stephanie Bennett's apartment complex over through Woodline to the neighboring apartment complex. And that was the first time that we had anybody actually saying, I think I saw the peeping Tom later or again. And that was very important because they could give us additional information. And that's when he told us he was walking a large brown and black dog. And when I said, do you think it's a Rottweiler or a Doberman Pinscher? He said, no, it's definitely a Rottweiler, I think. And he says, I'm so confident that this is the same person that I told my wife, hey, you see that man? He's a bad man. Don't get around him. And that's what led me and Jackie to go to the neighboring apartment complex and go to the office. And the only thing, when we went to that office, there's always, as an investigator, the first thing you want to do is when you deal with a lot of apartment complexes, you always want to know who the apartment management is, who the maintenance people are. But one of the things that me and Jackie always ask for is, who's your nosy people? Because there's always somebody in the apartment complex that's been there years and years and years. They may be an elderly couple. They may have, they know everybody. They go to every homeowners meeting. They go to every banquet.
They're in everybody's business, right?
They're in everybody's business. Exactly. And that's what me and Jackie wanted to find out. Hey, who's been here a long time and who's the nosy people? And we went to the neighboring apartment complex. We just sit down and ask them, who's the tall, skinny guy that has a Rottweiler? And, it's like we indicated in the other times we got interviewed about this case, it was like the record scratched in the office. And Jackie can tell you, both the girls in the office just sit there and looked at each other. And there was kind of an awkward silence. And even me and Jackie sit there and looked at each other and said, "Hey, what just happened?" And that's when another lady in the back come out and says, "The guy you're looking for with the dog is named Drew Planten, and he's a strange bird." That's how that happened.
Jackie, what did that feel like? I mean, after all these years of this case being a cold case and so much investigation that's gone into it, and now you have a name. I mean, you have a lead. It's a big deal.
It is a big deal. It was a big deal. And like Ken said, it almost gave you chills. The girl come out and she said, well, I know you're talking about Drew Planten, and he is a strange bird. And we just kind of looked at each other. We'd never heard that name. It had never come up. He was never canvassed. And so we said, tell us about him. And so that's when they kind of gave us some information about him. And and to be honest with you, getting a name like that was big, because prior to that, it had been, let's find people that live there, get a DNA sample, and exclude them if that's what we need to do. Not a lot of investigation.
Yeah. How many DNA samples would you estimate had been taken?
Over 200.
Yeah. I mean, there were a lot.
It was around 250 some when me and Jackie took over. Mm-hmm.
So now you've got a name. You do a little research. You find out that he worked for the state of North Carolina in an agricultural lab. And you say, we're going to pay him a visit, right?
Yes. I think we went by the apartment first, though. And
there was nobody there. So tell us, either of you, tell us about that visit. I mean, I remember this very distinctly, you guys describing this as a really strange encounter.
Ken, you go ahead.
Well, I'll start with leading up to our first interaction with Drew. Is we went to the apartment complex where he had moved to. And, the first conversation everybody brings up is, well, he stayed there a year after the murder. That's what some people asked us. Why would he stay there? But me and Jackie both said at the time, we thought it would draw a lot of attention if somebody moved out, because that was one of the things we asked as, the previous investigators. Tell us who just left right after the murder. Who's leaving? Who's breaking their lease? Because we may want to go talk to them. Well, once we found out, we actually got his name and we looked at his picture, Amanda, and his picture was not close to the composite. And me and Jackie was actually kind of frustrated at the time because he had long hair and our composite had very short, kind of like a military person.
And this was the composite. This was the composite from the Peeping Tom.
Yes, the composite from the Peeping Tom. That is
Gotcha.
correct. They had been put out on the media and passed around for a year or two now, and Drew Planten did not look even remotely close to that composite, and but his weight and his height was like, he was 6'4", 6'5", but he only weighed about 140 pounds, which puts you extremely skinny. And we went to his apartment complex 2 or 3 times and knocked on the door and got no answer. This is where he had moved from, but we could hear the dog whining behind the door. So we felt like we were at the right apartment because we could hear the dog whining behind the door. So Jackie and I think a lot alike, and we always leave business cards. So we left a business card in the door and said, hey, if you don't have anything to hide, then maybe he'll reach out to us. We got nothing. We went back the next day and the card was gone, which meant he took the card but did not call us. Most people are nosy by nature. So if they don't have anything to do with a lot of stuff, then if they leave a business card, then they usually reach out and say, hey, why do you leave me a card? We went back out a second and third time and left business card. And then at that point, he was obviously avoiding us. So we convinced apartment management to let us know where he worked at. And we went to his job. And that was the very first encounter at his job that we really looked at Drew, because he had to walk down a long stairway and a long hallway to get us. And the description that everybody had given on that Peeping Tom was, when you met him, he usually had his hands in his pocket. He looked down. He did not make eye contact, and he would not speak to you when you spoke to him. And when we watched Drew walk down those steps and walk down the hallway, he had his hands in his pocket. His head was looking down at the floor, And people actually spoke to him in the hallway on the way to us, and he did not speak back. And I remember me and Jackie just stood there and looked at him, and I said, "Did you see that?" And she said, "Yes, I did." And when he encountered us and we asked him, who are you? What's your name? This is who we are. We like to talk to you. And we asked him to come to the police station, and he says, "I'm not going down there," which was even better because Deputy would like to go to his place. And he says, "You can set up an appointment." And we said, "When are you available?" And when he gave us the date and the time, that's when we went to his apartment for the first time. And it was a very, very awkward moment because when we knocked on the door, Drew opened the door. The easiest way for me to put it, and we even kind of referenced this, but it was kind of a Hannibal Lecter moment where the door opens and he's standing there. You can tell he's got his shirt buttoned up to the top. It looked like he's made arrangements for us, like he has his best clothes on. He's expecting us. And he invites us in, and I kind of take off really fast, trying to get in his apartment to see what his apartment looks like. And he cut me off. He stopped me with his hand, and he said, "We can sit right there." And there was 3 plastic chairs, yard chairs, slid up against the wall, and that's where we sat and interviewed him.
And 2 things. First of all, Jackie, do you remember shaking his hand? Because I remember you guys talking about that.
Yeah, I mean, when you see him, he looks so almost emaciated. He was so thin. And when I shook his hand, he had such a strong grip. And it was actually very unnerving because you wouldn't have never looked at him and thought he would be strong, but he really was. His grip was very strong. And I even mentioned that to Ken when we left. And when we walked out the door and walked to the car, I looked at Ken and I said, "We may not have found the murderer, but we found the peeping Tom. We knew we had the peeping Tom."
And his apartment was odd, right, Jackie? I mean,
Yes.
And this is before the search. So from that kitchen, what could you see, or could you see anything?
You could see into the living room area, and it was very cluttered, but neatly cluttered. He had a lot of video games and things like that, but you couldn't see a whole lot of stuff because he would not let you. He kind of blocked your view as best he could. But it was cluttered, but it was clean, which,
Like an organized hoarder, I
yes,
guess.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so what happened in this conversation? I mean, he refused to give you a DNA sample, correct?
Yes, he did. He refused. And we talked to him about general things. I mean, Ken asked him about the hockey game because at the time, when she was killed, I think it was New Jersey was in the Stanley Cup or something. And Ken asked him if he went and watched the game anywhere and things like that. But he was very matter of fact with his answers. He did not volunteer anything. He was very hard to talk to. He wouldn't hardly, I mean, like I said, it was almost like yes, no. He wouldn't really divulge much. We asked for the DNA sample, and I remember him and Ken kind of got into an argument about it. And that's the most animated he became because he actually became angry over wanting DNA, and he refused to give it.
And I remember Chris Morgan saying, when you find the person who won't give you the DNA, there's a good chance you found the killer. Because again, if you're an innocent person, why aren't you giving it? So now you have a suspicion. You've talked to this guy, this very strange person, but you don't have a DNA sample. So you have to figure out how to get it legally, right?
That's correct.
And I mean, you guys went to great lengths. Ken, what are some of the things that your crew did to try and get that DNA? And what are some of the things he did to try to prevent you from doing it?
Well, once we had that visit, and Jackie said it. It was amazing how she put it. We asked him very simple questions. And 2 questions we asked him was, had you ever been to Stephanie's apartment complex? And he said no. And then we asked him, do you wear glasses? Because our composite had glasses. And he said no. But we knew he had a restriction on his driver's license. So one of the DNA and says, no, I'm not going to give it. And he actually responded by saying, I don't feel comfortable giving that to you because I don't trust the police. Well, at the time, we knew his mother was an attorney. And we even said, you're welcome to speak with your mom about this procedure. And me and Jackie were, because we could tell he was very nervous. And we said, we can tell you're very nervous talking to us. And this way we can exclude you and won't have to come back out here and make you feel uncomfortable. And he still refused. And when we left, we then decided, hey, listen, even if he's not the killer, Stephanie, he's definitely our peeping Tom. So we needed DNA from him. So the first thing we did was we spoke to our fugitive unit. And because he worked at a state building over off Reedy Creek Road, there was a large parking lot. And we had been over there and seen his car in the parking lot a couple of times. So our fugitive unit set up surveillance on him around the clock and started watching him at work. And a few times he came out to sit in the car. And this week it was like 101, 102 degrees outside. And they would let us know, hey, I see him. He's sitting in the car eating a sandwich and he is sweating profusely. Like he is super hot. And we wasn't real sure why he was doing that. But me and Jackie both agreed later on that we felt like he was looking for us, that he was doing counter surveillance on us, which our fugitive unit was doing a great job. We eventually had to make contact with his boss, his job, which was, we were very apprehensive about, but she was very nice. And she let us know his odd behavior. He was cleaning up everything in his workstation. He was cleaning up all of his hair. He was wiping everything down with hand sanitizer. Anything he brought with him to work, he ate lunch, he took with him. He was not leaving anything.
And didn't he at one point throw down a water bottle and a cigarette butt in the parking lot and they were tested and it wasn't his DNA?
Yeah, what happened is they watched him for a week. And because his car was very slow at the time, it was a methodical process because he didn't drive very fast going home. And that Friday, he left his job. He drove home in his car. And when he walked out of the office, he had a water bottle in his hand that had water in it. They clearly saw water in the bottle. When he got to his apartment complex, he got out of the car. The bottle was empty, and he walked right past one of these trash cans that was attached to a pole, a small one, and he threw that water bottle in that trash can. Obviously, our fugitive unit run right up there, grabbed it. They called me and Jackie and said, we have the water bottle. That was fantastic. That Monday, me and Jackie both went there, took it straight to Mark Baudet at the SBI, and we kind of sit around waiting with bated breath for that phone call later that day.
And it wasn't him. So now at this point, you're frustrated. And Jackie, you guys enlisted someone on the inside, right, of his office who might be a woman who might be able to give you information about his comings and goings, his habits that could help you with the DNA process. So tell us about that.
We went and sat down and talked with his immediate supervisor. Joanne, I can't think of her last name, I apologize, but and one of the things we checked was where was he at the time of Stephanie's murder, and was he at work that day? And we learned that he had come in late that morning, the day that she was found. He was late to work that morning. He wasn't late very often, and he didn't miss very often. And she was very good about getting us the records, and she checked with people to make sure it was okay. I mean, she didn't do it just, underhandedly, but she also told us, I think you're barking up the wrong tree. This isn't the right guy. That doesn't sound like him. And so she started helping us, but only because she was trying to prove to us that it wasn't him. She was trying to eliminate him as a suspect. She wasn't trying to help us catch him. So she started trying to do things to help us do that.
And I know she arranged a party, right, at the Golden Corral, which is a restaurant chain. And you had some officers there undercover. Can Ken, talk about that a little, about what they observed and what they were able to take away from that lunch.
Okay. When we reached out to the boss, she was a very nice lady. And initially, me and Jackie kind of prefaced, we prefaced it as we're concerned about his well-being because we had went and saw him, and we didn't tell her he was a suspect. We said, listen, he's not very cooperative with us, and we're really concerned about his well-being. So would you be so kind to call us or let us know if he did not show up for work? And two things, we were either worried he would hurt himself or maybe commit suicide because he was that nervous, or he would flee and go back to Michigan. And she let us know, hey, I don't think that's the case, but since you're concerned about him, I'll keep an eye on him. And that's when she started seeing the odd things around work. And she even got to the point where she was so uncomfortable that she told me, I don't feel comfortable talking on the phone to you. So can I email you after work, or can I send you messages? Which I agreed, that was perfectly fine. That's when she started saying, I see some things that is concerning to me. He's taking hand sanitizer. Somebody called him stealing the bottle, putting hand sanitizer in his backpack in the bathroom the other day. So now I'm worried. So now I want to go ahead and exclude him from this because I'm seeing some behavior that makes me nervous. So she says, I've asked my boss if I could take the whole office out for lunch. And I asked her, where are you going? She told me that where she was going for lunch. And two investigators went out there and sit at the table right beside where Drew and his co-workers was. And they called me, and initially I thought they was actually being sarcastic and being kind of fun because we pick on each other like that. And one of them said, hey, Ken, you're going to believe this, but he actually just got up to go to the bathroom, and he took his straw out of his sweet tea and went to the bathroom. And when he came back, he took it out of his cargo pocket and put it back in his tea. Then he actually got up again. He sneezed at the table, I believe, or coughed. And they got up and followed him to the bathroom, and he went to the bathroom and flushed those napkins that he sneezed on down the toilet.
So, I mean, he was either really, really paranoid or he was on to you. He knew that somebody was following him.
Yes.
Maybe a combination.
Yeah. A combination. And slightly going back, I want to go back to the water bottle a little bit because this kind of bridges us into the Golden Corral thing, is when we tested that water bottle and it was negative, me and Jackie was devastated. We was devastated. And, at that point, the water bottle did not match. However, we had sat across from Drew Planten. We had looked at Drew Planten, and everything fit. Even when we tried to kind of exclude him, we could not. Things fit. So that's when we decided to go back to him again. And we made him a second visit. And that was the visit that was kind of very, we were very heated. And we let him know that he had been bumped up from just a potential person to a person of interest or a suspect. And at the Golden Corral, when he eventually ate some banana pudding and used a fork, and they actually went to the manager and got permission to take that fork, okay? Because we don't want to take something that belongs to somebody. It may become an issue later on in some court proceedings, as we should not have had it. So we had to get permission to take it. And during that time when he disposed of the straw, he disposed of the napkins, and me and Jackie thought that other detectives kind of making fun of us because we thought it was him. Our boss had told us to leave him alone because his DNA has eluded him. But me and Jackie had sat across from the man, and when he ate that banana pudding with that fork, and our detectives was able to get it, we were nervous. We wasn't really sure what was going to happen. But at the same time, we were excited that we felt we would at least get some type of resolution on Drew Planten at this point.
So you get the fork tested, Jackie, and what do you learn from the fork?
We get the call from Mark Baudet. Ken actually got the call. We were working on another homicide at the time. And he says, this is the closest you've ever been, but there's two profiles on this fork. There was a female profile and a male profile.
Which means the fork was dirty.
Yes.
I mean, it hadn't been cleaned, right?
Right, that's correct. The fork apparently was not cleaned as good as it should have been. But he did tell Ken in that phone call, he said, this is the closest you've ever been, but we need a good sample. So we obviously went back to the office and told our supervisors that, what he had told us. And then we started discussing how we were going to get a very good sample from him for testing to compare a very good sample.
And just to back up a little bit, because you guys are kind of yelling into the wind here at this point where people are not agreeing with you and you're still persevering. Are you worried that if this is your guy, he's going to reoffend before you can arrest him?
Absolutely. That or disappear. Because he was, we weren't sure he wouldn't, again, commit suicide or just disappear on us. So, and there was really an unsung hero in all of that with the DNA. Is one of the guys on the fugitive unit came to me and Ken one afternoon in the hallway at the 4th floor of the police department and took us to side. And he said, "Hey," he said, "I just want y'all to know, nobody saw him drink out of that water bottle." He said it was full when he left and it was empty when he got there. He said, but nobody saw him drink out of it. And that was really the catalyst for the whole DNA thing at the Golden Corral.
Gotcha. So now you're trying to figure out how you're going to get the DNA sample. And you're working with the district attorney at the time. I believe it was Susan Sperlin, the assistant DA.
Yes.
And you decide or you figure out that, he does work in a state lab. It's government property, that you don't have the same expectations of privacy that you might have if you were in your home or you worked for a private company. And so you decide you're going to get something from that lab. Talk about that a little, guys.
We made arrangements with Joanne to go in after hours, and she specifically had him run tests on some lab work that he'd already done. She told him that the results were not good and that he needed to do it again. And that particular job he had to wear gloves for. And so she had him do that so that he would have to wear those gloves. After that, we went into the lab where he worked after hours with Mark Baudet at the SBI. And Mark swabbed the keyboard, he swabbed the radio, and we took the gloves for DNA analysis. We actually took the gloves. And Joanne gave us permission to do that. And they were state lab property, so there was no problem with us taking them.
And it was a little risky, Ken, right? Because you were worried he might notice something and you didn't want to put anybody else in danger. So how long before you got results? You take the gloves, how many hours, how many days?
They were really good at the SBI at that time. And I think it may have been maybe a day or two, Jackie, if maybe that long.
I think it was at least 72 hours.
Okay, at least 72 hours. And with the DNA, we had discussed so many ways to get a sample from Drew, such as his door handle, places he had been. But the key with the gloves was the gloves actually belonged to the state, and the boss had asked him to use these special gloves because they were ones that he could not dispose of, that he actually had to leave and reuse. So
Gotcha.
When we got the sample from those gloves, maybe 72 hours, they had it at SBI. And I remember our boss, Sergeant Perry at the time, got the phone call from the SBI, and they asked, because at the time, there was a discussion on whether it was Drew or another close family member. And the other close family member resembled our composite a lot.
And you had to eliminate that person, right?
Yes, that is correct. We had to eliminate that person because we had only a certain amount of alleles. I believe we had 6 out of 13 alleles on the DNA profile from the fork. So we needed enough to make a 100% positive match. And when we took it from the gloves and they called, I remember the discussion that Sergeant Perry had. They said, we have a match. Is it him? Is it Drew? Or is it the family member?
Relative? Okay.
And our boss, Joe Perry at the time, says, Ken and Jackie has told me who it is. and it's Drew Planten. And he says, you're right. It is Drew Planten. We got 100% match. At that point, we all came together, and Drew was at work that day. We had already confirmed with Joanne, his boss, that Drew was at work that day. You never will know what someone's going to do in an environment like that, and you never want hostages. You never want to. We've talked to him twice. The last one was fairly hostile. You don't want to walk up on them when there's other people in the room or in the office. So we made the decision to wait in the parking lot for him to leave and get out of the office, because we wanted no danger for anybody in the office, his boss, or any other coworkers.
And you didn't know if he had a weapon either. I mean,
that is
was
correct.
Another thing.
And quite frankly, Jackie and I had went out there twice, and we're pretty officer safety wise. We do really well looking out for one another. But Drew just did not strike me or her as the toting a pistol, packing type of guy, and that was, Lord knows we were so blessed to not have anything happen. But when Drew came out that back door pushing that bicycle, and we had myself, another detective, and a driver in the van, we rode up beside him. We slid the van door open really fast and jumped out on Drew. We proned him out on the ground. We put handcuffs on him. I stood him up. I let him know, you're under arrest for the murder of Stephanie Renee Bennett. That's exactly how I said it to him. He had his eyes closed. He never said a word. And when I started patting him down, when I felt a pistol in his cargo pocket of the same green pair of cargo pants that he had worn both times that Jackie and I had went out there to see him. When I pulled that loaded, I believe it was a 380, if I'm not mistaken, out of his pocket, I was very surprised. I can tell you that. I was very surprised. And we were very fortunate, and I'm so thankful that our bosses and everybody came to the conclusion, please let him leave the office. We didn't approach him walking across the parking lot because, quite frankly, we felt like either it was going to be a suicide by cop situation, or we felt like Drew was going to kill himself if he had the opportunity.
And when you bring the fugitive team, and that's basically, for a layman's term, that's like a SWAT team. That's a group of people that they do difficult arrests, dangerous arrests. You don't tell them in advance who this person is, right? I mean, you just say, we're going to arrest this guy. And I remember you telling me when you said those words, because this was a very emotional case for a lot of people in the department. It was emotional for the other officers who were there to hear that, oh my gosh, this is who we're arresting, the person charged in this case.
Yeah, at the time, because we wanted to keep this kind of in-house as much as we could. We didn't want any rumors or anything getting out because this case was such a high-profile case. We were afraid, even patrol officers just going out on patrol would start talking about it. People would overhear it. We didn't want that to happen, so we kept very close to the office. Our fugitive unit, which wears plain clothes, and they go out and do a lot of really great police work, surveillance, arresting fugitives. When I said that to Drew Planten, I remember one of the fugitive guys standing beside me, and they had no idea what we were looking at him for. They just knew we needed DNA from him. And when I said Stephanie Renee Bennett, I remember him stepping back. His eyes got really big, and he said a few curse words, and he walked off. And he walked off and told the rest of his unit what they had just arrested him for. And that was quite a moment for them to say, wow, I helped arrest him. And I've even recently to the officer that drove the van that day. He did not even know who we were going to arrest that day. What we told him is, if you just drive this van, you'll never forget this day, and it's for a very good cause. And he said, I'm with you. I got you.
Wow. Just want to back up 1 minute. Eliminating the other family member, Jackie, you guys sent some officers to Western North Carolina where that person lived, and you were able to get a beer bottle, right? To be able to look at their DNA.
That's correct. That relative also had a criminal record of a sexual nature. So that's where that kind of got into, was it the brother or is it Drew? And we were able to get him to go out to a club with us. And when he would get up to dance, the sergeant that was with us would take his beer bottle and put it in evidence bags. And we brought beer bottles he had drank out of back as part of the DNA to either exclude him or include him in our suspect pool.
Right. I mean, you had to be 100%. You had to be 100% on this. So you arrest him, I guess, almost immediately. You've got a search warrant for that apartment. What did you find in that apartment?
Oh, what didn't we find in that apartment? I know when we went back in, he had controlled the clutter when we were there for the interview. Now, when we approached him for that second interview that was more hostile, we got in the door. We didn't get far in the door, but you could also see that there was a lot of stuff sitting around that hadn't been there before. But when we went in with that search warrant, if he had one of something, he had 20 of them. He had spaghetti sauce, for example. I think he had over 30 bottles of the same spaghetti sauce. And it was just a hoarder's paradise in there. And when we walked in, sitting right in the living room was a laundry basket. And it matched the description of the laundry basket that everybody said was missing from Stephanie's apartment. So that was a very emotional time when we went in that apartment and started finding the things we found inside there.
Yeah. And I mean, I know you found a lot of strange things. I mean,
Yes.
sneakers and boxes that had never been worn, a lot of pornographic magazines with plastic on them that had never been opened, I guess like collector's items. But you also found some things that it appeared he had taken from other women, right? Underwear, and specifically some mail from a woman in Michigan. Talk about that. What did that tell you?
That day, to be honest, that was myself and Clem Perry were the ones, because we started dividing the search up between people because there was so much stuff to go through and log and inventory. So we had started doing it day by day, different people would go every day. And Clem Perry and I were there, and we found mail that belonged to a Rebecca Huseman in Michigan, Lansing, Michigan. And when we got back to and we would find other people's names, and we saw videotapes and things like that with people's names on them. When we get back to the office, we would run the names to see who these people were and what their current status was, things like that. Well, when we were
because he had some MapQuest, but this is prior to GPS. He had some directions to different women's homes, correct?
Yes, he did. He did. And one of the women that he actually had been following was someone he worked with. And there had been a lot of tension. And I think she may have gotten moved from the job she had to a different job because of the problems that the two of them were having, because she had seen him following her and she had went and complained on him. And some of the stuff he was doing at work, she had complained on him. So there was a lot of people's information in that apartment. I mean, lots of women's names, lots of MapQuest maps to different locations. It was a lot of material to go through and investigate.
But the Rebecca Huseman, yeah, that was. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. That was kind of another pivotal moment in the case.
Yes, it was, because when Sergeant Perry and I went back to the office and we ran her name, she showed up as deceased. And so immediately bells kind of went off, and we started trying to pull up information on what happened to her. And we ended up making a phone call to the Lansing Police Department. And I remember Sergeant Perry talking to the desk officer and saying, "Hey, we're from Raleigh. We have a homicide case down here, and we found this information. We're wondering if you know this person or can tell us anything about it." And he specifically remembered Rebecca Huseman and said, "Oh, yes, I remember that case. And I'm going to call the detective that's assigned to that case and have him call you immediately." And so we got the call from the detective assigned the case that had been working the case originally as that was his first case as a homicide detective. And he was now a supervisor, and he was still working the case.
Yeah, he had never forgotten that case. I've
No.
interviewed him. And so you start working with him. You have the gun that you've taken from Drew when he was arrested, and you make this connection. I mean, she was shot. She was not sexually assaulted, but you make this connection to the gun. What does that tell you, Ken?
Well, when we searched that apartment, and Jackie said it very well, it was the volume of clutter and stuff that was in that apartment took forever. A couple of things that stand out in that apartment is, one, the videotape, the VHS videotape that was in the VCR had a name on it. And when we played the videotape in the VCR there, it was of a group of teenagers playing at a river. And we heard someone on the tape actually say the same name and a full name in the video. So we checked on her and come to find out she had lived out at Drew Planten's apartment complex. We also found a list of 42 women that was written out on a list in his apartment. And we went and had to find those 42 women to make sure they were still alive. And they were. We contacted the lady that was on the videotape. We found her. She was in Hickory, North Carolina. And we actually said, hey, we have your videotape. And she says, no, I have this videotape. I said, no, ma'am, I'm pretty certain I have it laying on my desk. She says, no, I have the tape. She came to the police department and she actually brought the tape, which means that at some point Drew had probably went in her apartment, taken it out of her nightstand, recorded it, dubbed it, and put it back, and she never knew he was in her apartment.
So, so many potential victims, right?
So many
yes.
potential victims. And then when we started searching, we really was very surprised by the amount of weapons that he had. He had numerous guns. He had a lot of knives. He had a lot of what I would consider survival equipment, things like you want to go live in the woods, off the grid for a while. And then when we found the 45 caliber pistol in his, I believe in his bedroom, when Jackie and Sergeant Perry reached out to Michigan and found out that Rebecca Hoosman had been shot with a 45, they had just found that 45 in the bedroom that day. And
Wow.
that's when he says,
so it wasn't the gun he had on him. It was a gun found in
Yes.
his apartment.
Yep, in the gun that he had in his cargo pocket, it was a different gun.
And so you run the ballistics on that, right?
Yes, we run the ballistics on it, and that is an instant match to Rebecca. The gun that killed Rebecca Hoosman in Michigan is the gun that's actually in Drew Planten's bedroom.
And so now you have two murders, and obviously a serial killer. The exact definition, the legal definition, is 3. But you have a big period of time between the Hoosman murder and Stephanie's murder. And so you start into, is there information that might lead us down that path?
Yeah. Well, I did a lot of research on him. We even looked at his father's death as a possible, whether his father might have been murdered by him because of the alleged abuse in the family. His father died in a fire, and it was really suspicious fire. Even though the fire marshal in the small town he lived in said, no, it was, an accident. There was a lot of questions about that fire. He had sent information to somebody about, he had some kind of a stove that had like a pipe, and that the pipe had been clogged. Somebody had clogged the pipe. And eventually that's what caused the fires. The pipe was clogged and it caused the smoke to come in, and he died of inhalation, and it started the fire. And he burnt, but it wasn't beyond recognition. They were able to get him out and he was identified. But Drew also worked out in Oregon on a salmon experiment they were doing out there, where they were catching salmon and tagging them and, marking, keeping lists of them and things like that. And we looked at that really hard to make sure there were no women that were missing from out there that could have matched him. We couldn't find anything, but he did have some issues at the camp that they were at, because it was like a camp. It was almost like an internship he did after college. And he's actually moved out of the men's dorm out there and put into a cabin by himself because of issues he was having with people out there. And there were a lot of women who said he gave them the creeps.
So bottom line, you won't know. I mean, you'll never really know. He goes to court right after you arrest him. Talk about his demeanor in that courtroom. I mean, it was very similar to what you were saying when you arrested him, Ken. He had his eyes closed.
Yeah, Drew, when he was arrested and brought to the police station that night, he just sat in the interview room. He kind of played around with his handcuffs a little bit. Jackie really did a great job trying to talk to him, trying to communicate with him. He would not open his eyes or look at her or us. And you can see on the picture when he walked out that you all were, took, he has the same demeanor. His eyes is closed. When we did a search warrant on him at the jail, it's very intrusive, unfortunately. It's pulling pubic hairs and plucking hairs and things like. It's not comfortable. He did not flinch. He did not move. He just sat there on the bench with his eyes closed, with his hands together. And when we left him in detention or at the jail that night, we let everybody know, hey, he definitely needs to be put on suicide watch. We thought that would wear off in a day or two, or maybe before he had his first appearance. But when he got rolled into court and he was in a wheelchair, and he was kind of strapped down and he would not move, he would not walk. Even Jackie and I was a little taken back by that behavior because we knew he was normal before he walked out of his job.
Right. So 24 hours prior, he was normal.
24 hours prior, he was normal. So we felt like this was more of an act than it was some type of natural mental issue. And when he was rolled in, that really spoke volumes. That's when me and Jackie started saying we felt that Drew Planten's biggest punishment was being in the public. Like we felt like his biggest punishment was people looking at him in the courtroom,
Sure.
people looking at him as doing these crimes. And that's when we really got concerned about his well-being in jail because we didn't think he would last long.
Yeah, and I know, they described him as catatonic. They had to have
Yes.
his head elevated, propped up, and they moved him to Central Prison because we have a hospital there. And so the jail, the sheriff said, we can't handle him because he's beyond help. We need him to go somewhere where he can get medical help. And at first he did, and people thought he was getting better. And then abruptly he takes his own life and everything just stops, right? In terms of the case. What was that like for you guys getting that news? Because here you've worked so hard on this case and the biggest thing everybody wants is some answers, right? And
it was very
with
hard.
him.
It was extremely, we were both very upset about that. Very upset. And and you hear it, and I'm sure you heard it too. Well, that's the best thing that could happen. Save this taxpayers' money. You don't have to go to court. The family gets closure. But we were very, very upset because even to this day, there is no doubt in my mind that there's people out there that Drew Planten did something to that we just were never able to find. And who knows what kind of answers we could have got out of him at some point if we'd been given that opportunity. And it was taken away. I know, speaking for myself, I won't speak for Ken, but it was kind of devastating because you put all your heart and soul into this. And of course you want to know what else is there? What did we miss? And to have it just abruptly stop, it really was kind of a devastation to go from a full-on investigation to nothing, because that's exactly what it was.
Did you feel the same way, Ken?
Yeah, I will add, I know we were working on another murder when our captain come in there and told us that Drew Planten had just killed himself at Central Prison. And I sat back in the chair and I was truly devastated. And Jackie's right. There are a lot of conversation about, hey, this gives the family closure. This will save us from a trial. But as investigators, especially as investigators that work homicide cases, and like Jackie and I have basically sought this person for so long, we always hope there's a possibility that they will change their mind and they will come forth and talk to us. And with him being in jail or in prison, even if he had gotten convicted, Jack and I still would have made an effort to try to make some type of bond with him, to try to get information from him, to see if we could clear other cases, give other families closure. You know, he had rental agreements for rental cars where he had driven almost 700 miles a round trip sometimes. Nobody knows where he went leaving Friday and coming back on a Sunday on that rental car.
Because he didn't really have a social life from what you could understand.
He had no social life at all. He had no girlfriends. He had maybe one friend that had tried to take him out a couple of times. He stayed to himself. He was very quiet, and he did not go out and socialize with anybody.
So unfortunately, all of those answers died with him. And I know it was also hard for Stephanie's family, although they were happy that somebody had been charged. You know, this was like 4 years, right? I mean, it was a long time. It was
Yeah.
about 4 years after her murder. Um, is this a case that still sticks with both of you guys? That's something that you think about?
It does me, because I do feel that there's other people out there and that we didn't get to, finish the investigation, so to speak. We didn't stop investigating because he killed himself. We still continued to look at other cases. And we didn't really find anything. I know there was one case in Michigan that Ken really looked at really hard, and I won't say that was 100% ruled out. But we still continued. But yeah, I still think about that case all the time and wonder what could have happened if we'd been given the opportunity to talk to him down the road because he had started getting better supposedly at Central Prison. And you never know, somebody might decide to talk. I mean, he was antisocial sort of, but everybody likes to. I don't know. I just feel like we would eventually got information out of him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I guess, DNA has come such a long way.
Yes.
So you can only hope that maybe the DNA being in the database, which has gotten so much better, the state, national databases, that if there is a cold case out there, some investigator might figure it out at some point. But there's also the chance, right? Because I know I've talked to you guys about this, about just there's vulnerable people out there, right? There are women who are involved in sex work. There are people who are involved in the drug trade. And sometimes they go missing and there's just not a lot of evidence to follow up on. So you just really don't know.
That's true. I mean, they're a very neglected part of society as far as, they go missing and they either aren't reported missing or there's nothing to follow up on. I mean, and it's very sad. So yes, there could be people like that out there.
Any final thoughts, Ken?
Yeah, I would like to touch bases on what Jackie just said about the additional case in Michigan. I will tell you that I recently had a reporter in Michigan reach out to me about that case. And the girl's name is Christine D'Agostino. And it's in public out in Michigan, but she lived in the same apartment complex, and I believe the same building as Drew Planten. And she was found murdered in a storage room right beside her apartment, and it was very close to where Drew Planten resided. She was found nude. She was strangled with a pair of pantyhose, and there was a jewelry box that was stuffed in her mouth. That's how she was found. And I feel very confident professionally saying as an investigator that a lot of things match on that case. I sent all the DNA samples and the underwear and the women's underwear we collected from Drew's apartment back then. I had them tested to see if we could match them to Christine D'Agostino somehow, and we could not. But I recently received a phone call from a reporter out there that wanted to actually maybe have me have a conversation with her family to explain some of the circumstances around what happened here to see if
To
that would put them
relook
more
at
at
it.
ease. Yeah, to
Yeah.
relook at it out in Michigan.
And the bottom line is that it's very strange to look at the Huseman case, which was what, in the 90s, and then look at the Bennett case, which was early 2000s, and think that there were no offenses in between. That just doesn't make a lot of sense. Thank you guys so much for your time and your expertise and sharing the details of this really significant and very difficult case with us. You
Well,
did
you're
some
welcome.
great work, and I know a lot of people will be interested to hear some of these details. So thank you.
Very welcome, Amanda. Thank you for asking.